Welcome back, everybody, to another annual celebration of all the games that I've beaten. So in 2025, I went a little bit wild. The thumbnail is not a lie. I really did beat over 100 games this year. All kinds of different genres, all kinds of types of games and gameplay involved. So if you're looking for recommendations or you just like to learn about all kinds of different games, this is a great video for you. Throughout the video, I will have some fun featuring some of my purchased hardware this year, things I want to show off, things that I want to recommend. And instead of bogging down the end of the video too much, last year ran a little too long when I did the stats section, I'm going to be interspersing some stuff like that throughout the video. Now, if you pay attention to the screen, if you are not just listening to this video, you will see me display my metrics of the games played as we go along. So let's start off with game number 1, Xenoblade Chronicles, a JRPG for Nintendo Switch. This game was outstanding, and when I played this game, I thought that this was going to be the year of Xenoblade. I had it in my head that maybe I could get to X, and then I could play Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and in the span of a couple of years, I might get through the whole Xenoblade Chronicles saga. Didn't quite happen that way. These are some really long games and quite a big time investment, but I really enjoyed my time with this, and there's a full review on the channel. Now, at the far right, you'll see Game of the Year nominee. It has a little yes beside it. You will see that appearing for other kinds of games that aren't exactly my best game of the year, but I've kind of changed that to be a notification to myself that I want to talk about the game and recommend it for some specific purpose. All right, Xenoblade Chronicles Future Connected. That is the DLC for the game that just adds a little after story. I thought it was horrendous. It completely went against what one character learned in the main game. That's listed here as a separate game because that's how it's done online. Other websites like How Long to Beat have it as a separate game. Don't worry, there's some few games in here for buffer to make sure I made that 100 game mark. Number 3, Machine Knight, another JRPG, this time on the 3DS. So this was my first experience with Kemco. Actually, let's go back to before I even knew it was Kemco. I'm playing this game on 3DS, and I'd heard about it from some Hidden Gem recommendations video. And I thought, this has to be a joke. I mean, this is like RPG Maker, but on 3DS. I was completely unfamiliar with what this company was putting out. It was very rough around the edges, but I do want to praise it a little bit because the job system and the skill system is actually pretty inventive. The way it works is you've got these 2 wheels with spokes, and let's just say I start off with a class like Warrior. So there is a wheel there with all these spokes, and on each spoke is one of the Warrior skills. I get to slot it in there. Where that wheel connects to another one and its 2 spokes are touching, and let's just say it's another class that I could evolve into. Let's just say Dragoon. There's no Dragoon in the game. But let's say where Warrior and the Dragoon spokes meet, I get to pick a skill that is unique to the combination of those 2 classes. So that was pretty cool. You see here I gave it a 5 out of 10. Very rough around the edges, but still did some respectable things. Next, Spring Falls. This is a little puzzle game that I actually featured in my spring, what do I call that series again? My Spring Games 2025. So if you want to hear more about it, you could check that out. I thought for what it was, a little water physics game, it was pretty good. 7 out of 10. Next, Flower. You may have heard of this game back on the PlayStation. Again, it's in my Spring Games video, and it feels very much like a tech demo, but it's a little bit more than that. It does have enough gameplay elements. Again, check that video out for a little more information on these games. I gotta move kind of quickly here. If I've already talked about the games in some video, I'm gonna refer you to that. If I haven't talked about them, I will spend more time in this video. The final game of January, Growth. This is a strategy on Steam, and I was expecting something completely different. It's a hexagonal grid type of board game, let's call it. A strategy game, but it very much plays and feels like a board game. And if I'm remembering correctly, as you go along from hex tile to hex tile, you are trying to utilize a combination of resources like, bees, something aquatic, something land-based. And each of these provides you with 1 or 2 movement. With flying, with the bees, You can fly over little tiles, and with a land-based creature or land-based movement, you can only go directly to an adjacent tile. And the idea is, if I'm remembering correctly, to traverse most tiles, acquiring more resources, and getting to this center where there's a volcano, and if you get to the volcano, you win. Again, it was not what I expected. I thought it would be a little more of a simulation game having to do with the word, I'm sorry, is escaping me, ecology. But it was not that. So if you like these kind of strategic board game feeling games, I gave it a 6 out of 10. In February, I played the game Gris. Now, you may not pronounce it like that. You may see that and pronounce it Gris, but I believe it's the French word for gray. So Gris. Pardon my French. Yeah, I categorize this here as an adventure game, but that's being very generous. Even calling it a game is very adventurous. It is very much an interactive art project. And later in the year, I'm going to describe a game as feeling a lot like a movie, and it probably should have been a movie. In this game, it should have just been an art piece. The gameplay elements are sorely lacking. There's walking. There might be walking quickly. There's a little bit of elementary puzzle solving. And this is not a gameplay element, but there's a whole lot of looking around. Yes, the game looks incredible, but it plays terribly, and so it got a 3 out of 10. When you read about other people's experience with this game, calling it a masterpiece, clearly there's some major disconnect between them and myself. They took away a whole lot of symbolism and a whole lot of meaning from this game. That's not why I play games. And you know what? Even if I did play games looking for symbolism, this game didn't have it. Oh, she's depressed. Oh, something happened. No, it sucks. No, thank you. Next, Klonoa, Door to Phantom Isle. So this is part of the 2-pack re-release or port on Steam. Things have been cleaned up a little bit there. It might be multi-platform, but I plan on Steam. And I played the first game in the 2-pack. It was fine. I expected a lot more fun out of the game. I'd heard good things about Klonoa. You see here, I only gave it a 5 out of 10. It did some things kind of interestingly. For example, even though at its core it is a 2-dimensional platformer, there are sections where you move into the screen or the enemies come out towards you. So there's a little bit of depth, there's a little bit of 3D platforming involved, but it just wasn't all that engaging. It's very much a simple platformer where you keep on moving until you come to an obstacle, whether it's an enemy or something static. You overcome the obstacle, you keep on going. You see a collectible, it involves a jump, maybe a little bit of backtracking in some instances, and that's it. And I thought that the game, I don't know why so many platformers have this tendency. Towards the very end, like the last stage and the last boss fight, for example, all of a sudden the difficulty ramped up. So, love when they do that. Really love that. All right, Garden Galaxy, a simulation game that I rated 8 out of 10. Oh yeah. I just complained about minimal gameplay and interactivity with Gris. The Garden Galaxy, you might argue, is much in the same vein where you don't do that much. But if you're somebody who just likes, for example, in Animal Crossing or The Sims, personalizing things, creating, crafting, and decorating to suit your tastes, then this is a game for you. It has a lot of gacha and random style mechanics where you are constantly rolling just to get a whole big batch of items, kind of rolling a lottery to see what you'll get in exchange for your coins and currency. And then depending on what you have, you just decorate. This is not a game with an end goal in mind. This is just a game where you could try to collect every item that's in the game and decorate to suit your tastes. And yes, I gave it an 8 out of 10. And yes, I put 13 and a half hours into it. I just found myself constantly opening this back up. And even though I could have been working on another game at the time, could have been putting hours into something else, I just enjoyed getting the next item and seeing like, oh, is this going to go with the beach theme? Or, oh, is this going to go with the forest theme, the jungle theme? And I really like the little touches, being able to change the background, how some of the games, some of the assets in the game have this sort of breathing quality to it, just like they might kind of be moving a little bit, just nice little animations. All right, next up, Forager. This is a simulation game, so I have marked it here. Yeah, Forager, again, another one that I started not really knowing what was going to happen. The best way to describe this game, because just watching a video clip isn't going to do it justice. The best way to describe this game is an incremental crafting and exploration game where the combat and the building and all of the mechanics that are in the game are as simple or as bare bones as possible. Some people might argue with that. There are some mechanics, there are some upgrade paths, and some buildings and things you unlock later on that, sure, are a little more complex. For example, there's a whole farming system that I didn't really engage with because you start off on one little platform and you are trying to unlock, I think, the 11 remaining platforms to explore the whole land. Your starting area is kind of forest theme, and then you might go towards desert theme, and each of these has different materials and resources that are thematic. But at the end of the day, it's just about, again, this sort of tiered upgrade style progression game. And all the little cosmetics that go along with that don't really matter. They don't have too much weight. It's just about doing one thing and going to the next. All right, Tiny Toon Adventure, Buster's Hidden Treasure. Another game that's featured in the spring games of this year. You see, a lot of my my games played have to do with the next videos that are coming out, and because I've been so dedicated to doing the seasonal games, I said I would do 3 years, and I committed to it. You're going to see spring games, and then summer games, and then autumn games, and then winter games in this list. Tiny Toons, Buster's Hidden Treasure. Yeah, pretty classic platformer for the Genesis. I thought it was pretty good. It has some problems with difficulty spikes and some unfair sections where they just nab you of your lives way too cheaply. Playing it on emulator with save states is quite nice. I never did a save state in the middle of the level, but I would save state before a level to retain my lives. If that doesn't work for you, well, too bad. Next, Piku Niku. Also in my Spring Games video. A very quirky, funny game. Short little adventure where it's hard to sum up exactly what happens, but it's primarily an adventure game, and the gameplay that branches out from there never goes too far in any other genre. So a little bit of platforming, a little bit of puzzle solving, but primarily an adventure game with a lot of walking and running. Songbird Symphony. This is a nice little rhythm game that I played between my PC and my Steam Deck, and trying to play it on keyboard and trying to play it on controller. This is one where, if I remember correctly at the beginning, I was struggling to find a key or a button layout that worked for me. And I think you are kind of limited in how you customize your buttons here. So if you wanted to make it as easy as possible and just use the whole bottom row of your keyboard, you can't do that. Eventually I found some way of playing it, I think on Steam Deck, that worked pretty well for me. And it was kind of cute, kind of charming. The music, though, like for a rhythm game, the music was actually not that great, so that was a little disappointing, but the gameplay and the exploration was pretty fun. Paper Planet. I have this down as a shooter because that is what the main gameplay feels like. You are trying to defend your little planet from incoming assaults, spaceships, obstacles, everything that comes towards you and barrages you. And you have different ways of setting up the planet and the defense mechanism, the little turret or the little spacecraft that you play as. I tried a couple of different variations. Ultimately, I ended up beating the game with just one. It is a game that I want to go back to at some point and continue to unlock things. It just felt like it was kind of demanding, actually. So many rounds to eventually beat the game. And some of the boss fights, if you haven't been getting good upgrades, they just feel a little too punishing, and of course when you lose, it's all the way back to zero. And it's one of these games also where the more you play, the more you can unlock for future runs. Got a little bit of that roguelike element to it. Fun, non-incredible, 5 out of 10. Wonder Putt Forever. I love my golf games, and by extension, I love my mini putt games. I grew up in middle school playing all kinds of mini putt games online with friends in my classroom. This one is too artsy. Again, it's very much crafted for you to go from point A to point J, let's just say, and having to make most of the stops in between, B, C, D, E, etc. You don't get to go out of bounds in any kind of creative ways. You don't get to experiment on and off the course with different things. But what the game presents to you as you play on the course is pretty interesting to look at. Again, a bit of a visual spectacle without enough gameplay that makes it really engaging. So That's Wonder Putt Forever. If you're looking for a mini golf game, probably look elsewhere. If you are looking for a game to show off to your YouTube following and to be like, guys, look how cool this looks. Well, you're probably not watching me in this video, but if you want to steal a game and talk about it as if it's the next best thing, then go ahead. It looks really cool. Now we're going to March. Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. I really liked this game. I like this game more than Tropical Freeze. I don't know if that's because it was a little more... I can't even say it's bare bones. Okay, so you don't have Cranky Kong to be hopping on his cane and breaking the levels that way like you do in Tropical Freeze. This was just a really competent game. The difficulty was much more manageable. It was fairly consistent compared to the spikes in Tropical Freeze. And maybe at this point, because I just played so much Donkey Kong Country in this new era, I had a little more familiarity with it, and I enjoyed it more for that reason. I'm not exactly sure, but I did like it more than Tropical Freeze. Finally, closing out March, Secret of Mana. Playing this game, looking for a spring game. To me, just because it's got the green grass and the pretty pink flowers, that doesn't exactly make it spring-like enough. But who knows, maybe I'm a hypocrite and maybe it gets mentioned next season because I'm out of ideas. But no. Overall, this JRPG that I played on the Switch that released for the SNES, I find incredibly overrated. The handling and the controls are quite abysmal, but you will get used to them. The magic and the weapon system and going into the circular menus and so many different pages in the menu, you get used to it, but that doesn't mean it's good. And the gameplay required a surprising amount of grinding because your weapons and your magic have levels associated with them, and they scale quite strongly as you level them up. You get to certain bosses, you get stuck being able to do very little damage. They kill you a million times, even if you try to revive, you still can't bring them down. So you gotta take a break, go outside somewhere, grind against a bunch of enemies, walk back to the inn, get your stats restored, etc., etc. It was a painstaking JRPG. In April, Pokemon Soul Silver. This was a replay, one that I enjoyed very much. I did everything my favorite way, so picking Cyndaquil as the starter, giving him probably the name Cinder, if I'm remembering correctly. I've always got the same handful of names that are reused when I play these games. And yeah, that was just one that I wanted to replay and have some fun with, and it's still a fantastic game, 8 out of 10. Bug Fables, an RPG that is in a Paper Mario style. I have talked about this game also in my Spring Games recommendations, so go check it out there if you're so inclined. You can see here for my playtime, 36 hours. It's a little bit of a longer game, 7 out of 10. When I play these kinds of games, if I feel like they're at least decent, which a 6 or a 7 out of 10 is, I can't help but going for all this sort of side content, and that's where the number probably came up a little bit. Beach Spikers, Virtua Beach Volleyball. So you can see here by what I'm playing, I'm moving into my summer games now. So that is where this game is featured in my summer games recommendation. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed this one. It's got 2 different modes, kind of the arcade style, pick up and play, and then a World Championship mode where you can customize a couple characters, raise your team, raise your stats over time, and try to get first place there. Crazy Zen Mini Golf, an abomination for Nintendo Switch. I can't help myself from perusing the eShop when I know that there are sales and looking at those games that come down to $1 or less. This was one such game. This was not worth the purchase. It was probably not worth the 2 hours that I played, but it did provide a lot of entertainment with all of its jank and all of its bugs and glitches and the little things that I discovered. Kind of fun to be able to say that I got some hole-in-ones. Kind of fun to be able to say that I broke the game in a few instances, but absolutely not worth your time. So if you see this one on the eShop, do avoid it. Citrouille, Sweet Witches. Forgive me if my French is making your ears bleed. If I remember correctly, that word means pumpkin. So Pumpkin Sweet Witches was my attempt at finding a game for autumn. Did not qualify for that. I feel like just because you throw a few pumpkins here and there, or you have a graveyard theme, doesn't necessarily capture the feeling that I'm going for in my autumn games recommendation. What this is a puzzle platformer, a little bit of action, where you've got a limited series of platforms per stage, and you are trying to stamp down the flowers or the grass or whatever the asset is on the individual tiles of those platforms. And while you're doing that, you're avoiding enemies. With the character I played as, I was able to spawn these ladders directly above me, climb them, recall them to make the enemies not be able to climb up after me, and just kind of maneuver and avoid the various enemies as you touch every single tile here. A little bit hectic, a little fun, kind of challenging. Felt like it just needed a little more gameplay for the freshness of the presentation and the quality that went into the art and the animations and everything. It just lacked in some fun gameplay. If you know what puzzle game this is based on or what platformer this is based on, I would love to hear that. All right, going into the month of May, and I knocked out Cyberpunk 2077. There is a full review of this game on the channel. You could see here that is one of my Game of the Year nominees. Oops, and sorry, while I mention that, I just have to quickly scroll up and see some other Game of the Year nominees. Okay, so there's only Pokemon Soul Silver, Xenoblade Chronicles, and Cyberpunk to this point. Good. So those are true, like these were great games that I played, and they are deserving of the Game of the Year. Okay, haven't gotten any niche categories yet. Yeah, Cyberpunk, go check out the full review of it on the channel. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Put 51 hours into it, which feels quite short, especially when I played The Witcher 3 for around 150 hours, I want to say. Could have been as high as 200. Played through that game twice. And with this one, just because of the story beats and the way that it drags you in, there are a lot of paths that you can play this game as when it comes to the story. There's a lot of different decisions you can make. But ultimately, it wasn't all to my tastes and preferences. I'll just leave it at that. All right, Bee Simulator. Hey, this made my Summer Games recommendations. This was surprisingly a lot of fun. It's got a little bit of fetch quest. It's got a lot of exploration, a lot of adventure, some surprisingly nice graphics to look at, and a fun element to the game, a fun feature where you have your bee vision, and you could see flowers according to their value, and the value in this game is based off of pollen as a resource. So, again, I talk about another video. Worth checking that game out if you want something kind of casual and just fun to explore. Castlevania on NES. This was my first time playing a Castlevania game, and I really enjoyed it. This game was so hard. There's no way I beat this game without save states and on emulator. But I'm glad I played it. I'm glad I persisted. I did as much as I could with my own skill and without having to spend a million hours learning the intricacies of the game. I recommend people trying this just to see where Castlevania came from, what the series is like. And you'll see in a couple, well, you can't see it on your screen yet, but in a couple more games, I'm going to talk about Super Castlevania 4. But first, Super Mario Bros. 2. This was one that I grew up with, and I remembered playing quite a bit with my brother and sister. We all liked playing as Princess Toadstool and floating around. We all liked the music. I didn't appreciate the music as much as a kid. Boy, that little introduction scene where you're falling down, down, down until you enter your first door and the character select, those are outstanding. I love that ladder song in particular a ton. But this is not exactly my platform of choice. The levels are so chaotic and so randomly designed, it seems. There's a little bit of backtracking, which is really interesting for a Mario game. But this Doki Doki Panic style of Mario game is not my favorite. I like the more traditional Super Mario Bros. 1, Super Mario Bros. 3. You get the idea. Still a fun game. And then, another one that I couldn't beat without save states. Didn't want to try. Like you see here, I beat it in 2.5 hours? Maybe I could have done it in 5, 6, or 7 hours without save states, but I was on a mission here to go, go, go. Not because I was thinking of beating 100 games. No, not at this point in the year. I just had so many other seasonal games that I had to get to. Super Castlevania 4. I'm realizing looking at this, I can't even read what platform that's for because of the white font on the yellow background. I didn't choose the font color, all right? Google Spreadsheets chose that automatically. I just picked the background color for the platform. I played on SNES, in case it wasn't obvious, Super Castlevania 4. And I liked the improvements compared to the original Castlevania. The original Castlevania still has a lot of charm and a lot of unique qualities. The music, the presentation. Super Castlevania 4 is a remake of the first game. And a remake it is, not a remaster, not like what we're seeing with a lot of games these days. It changes a lot of things, makes some things easier, and some things a little more difficult. This game is featured in my Autumn Games 2025. The Witness. one of the most overrated puzzle games out there. I'm kind of kidding. It's an environmental puzzle game. It's brutally difficult at times, and surprisingly, a lot of the puzzles have to do with little grids, little mazes, just not the kind of environmental puzzling that I would expect from a very colorful and very vibrant world. It's got a little bit of a story where you don't exactly know who you are. You're dropped on this island, and as you go from puzzle theme to puzzle theme with the various seasons and decorations around the island, you might discover a little bit more about yourself or what's going on. That stuff didn't really matter. There's a little bit of this pseudo-intellectual dropping of, scientists, like real scientists from our life, dropping their quotes in the game, and whatever. That stuff I just kind of ignore. It's not that I can't stand it, just kind of ignore when it comes up. I'm like, oh, pretentious. No, thank you. I already got enough of that this year playing Gris. French for gray. Got to use a French word for your title. Anyway, sorry. I might be making fun of a lot of people and a lot of things in this video. The Witness is fine. Go look at somebody else's review if you want them to praise it. I'm not going to praise it, but still, it had a lot of great features. I think one of the reasons why I even brought it down a whole digit in my score, is because the difficulty of puzzles that are required to beat the game become insane. Seriously, they become insane. And it was another one where it was like, I don't want to have to take a break from this, go eat lunch, think about the game in the back of my mind for an hour, and then come back to it. Was not interested. So every now and then I used a walkthrough, probably no more than 10 times, but it felt kind of dirty doing that anyways. A Short Hike, a very cute adventure game, one of my Game of the Year nominees, and a game that was at the top of my list for my Autumn Games 2025. This game blew me away on multiple fronts. The exploration and the allowances that you had when you were exploring. I should say the lack of restrictions you had while you were exploring. The graphics, I call them hypnotizing almost, or mesmerizing in my review of the game. And they are that. The way this messy, and it is objectively messy, but the way this messy pixel style kind of shimmers as you play, and rotating the camera is almost a little trippy when you look at it. It may take a little adjustment for your eyes. You might even think it's ugly at first, but it will entrance you. And yeah, this is a Game of the Year nominee because it is a very good game. Not to the same level as the JRPGs and the RPGs that I've played, but worth pointing out maybe as one of the indie games of the year. Next up, Nano Assault EX for the 3DS. This was awesome. This is a Game of the Year nominee, again, not because it's one of the best games that I played this year, but because for what it was, and that is a little handheld shooter, it was pretty incredible. Very fun, not too difficult. Apparently this game has like a smart difficulty, where if it senses you getting through the early levels too easily, it cranks up the difficulty a little bit. And then if it ever detects that you're dying too often, it might reduce the number of enemies that spawn. So that was pretty cool. I don't know if I can confirm that for sure. I would have to I don't even have footage of this game. I played on 3DS. Anyways, I'll figure out what I do about that in post. And I really recommend it. And I want to point out its presentation as well. I love when games decorate the menus and everything else, your UI, to be in thematic accordance with the game. That's a lot of mumbo jumbo. Let me rephrase that. I like when the designers make things like the menus and the UI match the theme of the game that you're playing. There you go. So in this one, it's like you're a microscopic little airship and you're going around destroying different viruses. And so they go all in on the kind of mechanized UI. All right. We're moving on to June with Dead Rising. I was hoping that Dead Rising, well, a couple of things. First of all, I was hoping that it'd be a really good game. That would be my autumn recommendations. And then I was looking for whether it was heavily or loosely based on something like Dawn of the Dead or the Romero movie with the guys in the mall. You know what? I just get the titles mixed up. Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Dead, The Living Dead, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean if you've seen those movies. So I wanted to see how much it had in common with those. Ultimately, not too much. This game definitely takes its own approach to storytelling and to the zombie outbreak that's happening here. It's got all kinds of Capcom cheesiness in the dialogue and everything. It's got clowniness with you being able to take Frank West and go to the women's change rooms or the women's clothing stores, put on some dresses, and you watch him do his little dance in the change room. Very alluring stuff. And really, you see here, it's a 5 out of 10, and the gameplay was a bit of a disappointment. I did not have too much fun having to reset multiple times. That's what I should describe. Excuse me, I've taken so long not to describe that. So in this game, you are expected to die and lose. And as you're killing these zombies, you're acquiring experience, you're leveling up your skills, and you're learning about the game and the map and what happens on the 4 or something days that the game takes place during. There are a lot of scripted events that happen at different times of day on those days. So you're expected to die, take your experience, take your knowledge of the game, and go back to day 0, do things more efficiently, do things better and faster. It's innovative, but I don't like it in this type of game. So, for various reasons, some of them subjective, some of them objective, this was only a 5 out of 10 for me. And then I played and beat Alan Wake. I did recommend this in the autumn games. There were times when it was definitely a struggle. The story is not as good as the writers think it is. The gameplay had a lot of potential, but they kind of slow you down in some instances. They take a little too long to make the gameplay good and robust in the early hours of the game. So instead of giving you a large variety of weapons to play with and a large variety of enemies for you to vanquish, they keep it fairly streamlined, 1 or 2 enemies, 3 or 4 weapons. But by the end of the game, in the later chapters, the combat does get more fun. Does the story get better? Not necessarily, but it's fine. It's a passable, serviceable game. In July, I beat Tales of Arise, one of the Game of the Year nominees because it is that good. A JRPG. Oh wait, I reviewed this fully, so go watch that instead. You guys should know what Tales of is like. And Tales of Arise is the first truly modernized entry in the Tales series, I want to say. The combat is more three-dimensional than before, more robust, more cinematic than before. All right, next game, Cadence of Hyrule. A really fun rhythm game. I knew I was going to get to this at some point. It was only a matter of time because I love my Zelda, my favorite series or franchise of all time. And this one was fairly fun overall. It's hard to say whether I liked it more or less than Crypt of the Necrodancer. It was a little bit of a mixed bag. It almost felt like starting out, it wasn't as good, and it left a lot to be desired. I liked the Zelda themes that were tied in, but the actual gameplay was a little bit lacking. Eventually, though, you get more items as Link or whatever character you play, more things that you would have in a typical Zelda game, typical Zelda adventure, and the game got a whole lot more fun through that. The maps and the exploration, the little dungeons and the grottos, and even a lot of the boss fights, if you are a fan of the Zelda games, you'll feel right at home playing this. You'll see a lot of familiar faces and have a lot of familiar experiences. Almost felt like there could have been a little more dungeon crawling, but that's okay. Still a very good game. Mario Strikers Battle League, a sport game for the Nintendo Switch. I've heard everything about this game, from it being a disappointment, underwhelming, whatever. From what I understand, I may have played this game after it had a few patches. This is my first Mario Strikers game, and while it did start off a little slow or a little bit just kind of confusing, it became really fun. This is one of those sports games where the best players, or you versus the hardest CPUs, are going to have to know a few tricks, like optimizing your tackles. When is the right time to tackle? Do you tackle or do you just kind of go up against somebody and try to strip the ball that way? I don't know if these kinds of games are for everybody, where the better you get, the more streamlined the gameplay becomes. Like Fortnite is the perfect example here. Fortnite can be pretty fun for a casual player, but the better that you get at the game and the better the opposition, the more important it is to have that really obnoxious, fast, spammy building. We're just quickly trying to get a tower erected as quickly as possible, get above the other player with some height, and then, crash down on them with a shotgun or whatever. High-level Fortnite is disgusting and terrible. And usually these games with strict metas, I would say the same things about. But Mario Strikers Battle League has a little more freedom in how you play. And when you unlock the more challenging difficulty for the different cups. So there's 2 difficulties. Once you play the Galactic difficulty, I believe it's called, you'll see each of the team's AI has a tweaked parameter. One of them is more offensive. One of them is more defensive. And there are little variations that you make to your gameplay to try to beat them. So I think this is a really underrated game. I had a lot of fun playing it, and I do recommend it for anyone looking for a different sport game. Bokura, a co-op puzzle game that I did feature in my 5 games for autumn 2025, but worth mentioning here, you must have 2 copies of the game, so you and the person who you played with, and they will have to play on their own system. It is not local co-op. So 2 different ways of playing, like 2 PCs, and each having your own copy of the game. And I don't know if there's cross-play or not. That said, once you get past that, and once you've hopefully only bought it on sale, it is a really fun co-op puzzle game where you and the person you're playing with will experience completely different things on your 2 screens. And whether you want to tell each other in detail what you're seeing, or kind of keep that as a secret until different points in the game or until after you beat the game, is up to you. I recommend maybe you don't share too much about what the other person is seeing. It's fun. There are some interesting puzzle designs here, and I have it as the Game of the Year nominee just because I have not seen a co-op puzzle game done in this style. So for its uniqueness, and because it is pretty decent, I recommend it. Pico Park, an action game that I played on Steam. You can play this, and I believe you will have different puzzles and levels and challenges available to you, depending on how many players you enter. So I think I played a little bit of the single player, and I mostly play the game and I beat it with 2 players. And there are these little tandem activities, like trying to stay within each other as you both fly spaceships to get to the end of the level. Both of you having to make your jumps at the right time as you dodge incoming projectiles, and all kinds of other little mini games and activities. Very fun. If you even just have one person you want to play with, check this game out. It does support local co-op, unlike the previous game. And I gave this a Game of the Year nominee because it was surprisingly fun, and it'll have you and the person you're playing with probably laughing at just the insanity and everything ramping up, and even having a little competition with the other person. Seriously, an 8 out of 10. Very underlooked, probably unknown little game there. Closing out the month with Costume Quest, another game that made my Autumn Games recommendations. This game was a little tough to play in long segments, so I had to break it up over the course of, I don't know, let's just say 4 or 5 nights. Once you play for about half an hour of wandering around, knocking on doors, going through the same drawn-out turn-based battle where your options for how to attack and what to do are fairly limited, it does get tiresome, it does get repetitive, but it's got a cute presentation. It has some cool gameplay features, so it is getting a little recommendation, but not enough for my Game of the Year. In August, I Am Setsuna. So now I'm working on my winter games. I Am Setsuna was a lot of fun. I did here give it the Game of the Year nomination, even though it was only a 7 out of 10, because the gameplay and the combat specifically, was well worth it. This is what I wanted when I played Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger, if you've watched a previous video of mine, I have called it a very overrated game. This delivered where that game did not. I know a lot of people like Chrono Trigger for the story, yada yada, but for me, it's got to come down to having really fun and robust gameplay. And the way that you can break the game by becoming overpowered really did it for me here. I talk about this in my winter games, so you could go check that out there as well. Number 40, Mario Golf World Tour for 3DS. So this is a game that I never thought I would go back to because it always lagged like crazy on my 3DS. And I don't know what it was, if I just got bored or if I wanted something really light to play, but I did go back to it. And I ended up doing a few of the side missions and side content available. And I played through all the courses so that you could call it, a campaign. So you could get the credits to roll. It was pretty good, pretty fun. Ultimately, it ends up lacking a lot of the features from Toadstool Tour that I liked. You don't have the greatest projection for where your shot's going to go. So I don't know why those words couldn't come out. But you don't have the greatest view of where your ball is going to be traveling. And these games shouldn't be about, you have the best skill at kind of guessing where your ball is going to go, or who can be the most precise at getting an A-B top spin when the little meter comes back and you shoot your shot. I feel like these games should be about bumping into random obstacles and making Pikmin fly out of the flowers like you did in Toadstool Tour. I feel like it should be about the Mario fanfare. This game does have a decent amount of that, but again, because it doesn't have the best shot mechanics, 6 out of 10. Bunny Hill. Maybe one of the games that nobody watching this video has ever heard of before, but I really loved this game. I'm hoping that by the time I edit this video, I'll have recovered my footage recorded on the Steam Deck. So what this is a very fast-paced, frenetic racing game. It's a downhill racer, so you're always moving, and you'll try to hit a couple of flags. Those will give you little speed boosts. You're trying to avoid obstacles, and you are trying to fly through the air, going fast and going off these ramps. And if you do it successfully, you will be skipping the majority of these levels until you finally get to the end goal at the end. The reason why I love this game so much is, even though I only played it for 2 hours, look, it's because I did everything I wanted to do in that 2 hours. There was one summer afternoon, I'm outside with my Steam Deck, Leo's having a good time in the sun, I'm having a good time with my iced coffee, playing this game, and there becomes a moment where I realize that I'm basically breaking the game, although it's intended, but you feel pretty special because you've gotten 3 speed boosts in a row, and then you go off a ramp, and your skier is just flying at what seems like the speed of sound, downhill, bypassing everything. The world is whipping by in a blur below you, and then the game just ends like that when you hit the end goal. I had a lot of fun doing the time trials. My little self-imposed goal there was trying to get 3 speed boosts, get that maximum velocity flight, and then get a sick time that way. Yeah, I just said sick, but whatever. That's the kind of like game that this is. You know, you're doing these tricks, you're getting these fast speeds. You're like, oh, this is sick, man. So 7 out of 10 because it felt like there wasn't enough content. There's only 4 levels. Some of the music in this game is outstanding as well. If you guys see this game for cheap and you like silly racing game, I can't even call it a racing game because it's probably going to come down to you trying to beat your own times. But if you like the kind of elements that I'm describing, definitely grab this one. It was a ton of fun. Panelki. You may have heard me not recommend this game from my winter games just a few weeks ago or whatever it was. You are a janitor in Siberia. You pick up garbage, you dig up snow, and that's it. Did not enjoy it. 3 out of 10. Look at that. That is a dismal rating. Street Fighter 2. Here we go. So, middle of August, actually August 21st, my birthday. And I'm playing a fighting game. And this was my first time going this far back to play a Street Fighter game. I forget what it was exactly, whether I watched a video on Justin Wong's channel, who's a prodigious and a very skilled and longtime fighting game professional player. Now he mostly streams, but very interesting and fun content there. I got inspired to play some Street Fighter. And so I went back to the roots here with Street Fighter 2, and I had a pretty good time playing that game. I could not predict what was going to happen, though. Let me give you guys a little bit of a spoiler. This year was the year of fighting games. Super Mario Bros. 3, beaten on August 23rd. Look at that, guys. It's the only 9 out of 10 game in this whole list. So, of course, it gets the Game of the Year nomination. How could it not? It's one of my favorite games of all time. In many ways, it's the best game that I played this year. Played through it twice. Played through once, beating it on my own. Played through it a second time, beating it in co-op, in tandem. I could beat it a third time and a fourth time, and I still would not get bored this year. I want to mention now one of that pieces of hardware that I alluded to earlier. This controller here. So I was having a really hard time with whatever I had, a Kiwi Taka or a Logitech, a keyboard even, and it was not doing it. I asked Alex of TurboZone and Spencer of RPG Archive what they played their retro games with. And one or both of them answered, sorry guys, I don't remember, with this controller. The 8BitDo SN30 Pro. So you can see here, SN standing for Super Nintendo. It is modeled after the Super Nintendo controller. Analog sticks are side by side, 2 of each shoulder button, or trigger button if you will, and a couple of more modern buttons here and here to be able to play this on the Switch as well. This is the perfect retro game controller, at least for doing emulation on PC. So this was what helped me play Super Mario Bros. 3 and the upcoming game, Grapple Dog. I did a little standalone review for this game. It was that good and that surprising. Not great enough to compete with the Tales of Arise and with the Cyberpunk and the Xenoblade, but still, for these hookshot mechanics and the bouncing around and the speedy platforming, it uniquely stands alone for at least being among the best platformers that I played this year. Now we're going to September. Near Death. This was in my Winter Games 2025. In this game, you are in a blizzard, and you're going around to a bunch of defunct and unpowered buildings, trying to restore light, trying to get some pieces together, and make your way out of the blizzard and back to safety. All right, next we are going to move on to Street Fighter Alpha 2. So, having played Street Fighter 2 and beating it on my birthday, I just kept on thinking about it, and I guess I was seeing these recommendations on YouTube, and I wanted to finally get into the fighting game genre. I probably watched some Evo videos, I probably watched some Street Fighter 4 videos, but I wanted to go back to the roots. So I purchased the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection by Capcom. And I was having a pretty good time there, trying out the different games, but I could feel just how much I sucked at these games. I wasn't able to do fireballs consistently. I wasn't able to do complex moves consistently. Well, not even consistently. I couldn't even remember what the inputs were. This game had a lot of down to right. They call it quarter circle and then use a punch, or quarter circle, then use a kick. All of these movements that I never really bothered picking up when I played fighting games previously. Some of my favorite fighting games of all time, Power Stone, Soul Calibur 2, Super Smash Brothers, they don't have these issues. They don't have these inputs. At least right now, it's evading me what you call these exact types of fighting games, but these kind of combo fighters, these complicated input fighters, I don't know. Long story short, though, because I wanted to learn more, because I wanted to experience more, because I wanted to see if I could get better, I bought this. Another 8BitDo product, and this is their NES-styled arcade stick. I did this for a couple of reasons. The main one was not to become like a fighting game pro or to even emulate the pros using their arcade sticks. In fact, a lot of the pros now getting into the games, they are using controllers. And from what I understand, a lot of the more modern fighting games have shortcuts or have simplified inputs for doing a lot of these complex moves. This, for me, was about recapturing a childhood and past that I never experienced. I was not one of the arcade kids. And this was also about honoring fighting games and where they came from, and kind of giving back to fighting games in a way that I felt was meaningful. I was going to get an arcade stick, and I was going to play the games that they were intended, and I was going to try to recapture some of those feelings that I never got to experience. This was a fantastic purchase, but whereas with the SNES style controller, and I could compare that to a bunch of others that I've tried, and I could confidently say that was worth getting, this one I do think is worth getting. I just can't compare it to other arcade sticks. I don't think I had any input drops or anything like that. Whenever I failed to do an input, it was all because of me and user error. So this was really helping to signify my foray into fighting games and going back to the classics. And you'll see here, I'm just going to kind of lump these all together, all right? Street Fighter Alpha 2, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, Fight for the Future, Street Fighter 2 The World Warrior, Street Fighter 2 Turbo Champion Edition, Street Fighter 2 Turbo Hyper Fighting, Street Fighter 2 The New Challenger, Street Fighter Alpha Warrior's Dreams, Street Fighter Alpha 3. These are all... Street Fighter 3 New Generation. Sorry, my laptop screen doesn't show all of these. Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. These are all among the dozen Street Fighter games that are included in that Capcom or Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. You can see here I spent as many as 2.5 hours playing any game to just 1 hour. They range from being 7 out of 10 for me to as low as a 3 out of 10. Oh, for Street Fighter 1. I don't know if there was a single game in this collection that I was able to beat without the in-game save states. Street Fighter in particular was just such a menacing game, especially the final fight versus Sagat. My God, he is one of the cheapest enemies in any game I've ever played. But still, I had a lot of fun grinding through it, trying to get my fireballs out, trying to get my blocks in time, realizing that Street Fighter was not necessarily meant to be played as an all-out attacking, with an all-out attacking play style. Trying to get my blocks in. I even played online once, and I got lucky, and I won my first fight there. And you know what? It was just this whole month, and it actually extends into future months, you'll see. I had a lot of fun playing these Capcom fighting games. That's mostly what I played this year, is Capcom fighting games. I haven't branched out to the other ones yet, but in the coming years, that is my plan. Get into some SNK, get into some Fatal Fury, and some Guilty Gear, and games like that as well. The year of fighting games will just pause for a moment as we talk about some other ones. Frost, a deck building game that I recommended in my winter games. Very fun, very unique as you try to set out in a caravan across the tundra. I think in my video I called it the Arctic, and I think it's actually the tundra. And you try to balance your little resources of hunger and etc. Arrival, Zero Earth. This was a really interesting roguelike where you've got a little army of commandable units. I can't even call them commandable units. You have one group of units that basically plays and handles as one unit, and you get to mix its composition between flamethrowers and assault rifles and all these other kind of weapons. There feels like there are a lot of reskins on these different units, and as you're playing the game, you're going to little bunkers, you're destroying little items here and there, you're getting these power-ups that increase your stats. You get the idea from the gameplay. Relatively simple, but still somewhat addicting and pretty fun. OXO Minimalist, or 0x0 Minimalist. This was a very simplistic little puzzle game on the Nintendo Switch, where you move around your X, and you try to push and corral the zeros into a darker, shaded area. The reason why I reviewed this game, so go ahead and watch that, is because there was a question unanswered on the internet. How many levels are there? How long is this game? I failed to answer the first question. I don't know exactly how many levels are there, but I knew that I beat it when, I did like the last level, and suddenly the levels started to feel familiar to me, and they got a lot easier as well. And I was like, whoa. The game just reset on me. It took me back to level 1 and I didn't even realize it. So what did I write here? 2 hours of playtime. So there you go. There's about 2 hours worth of puzzles here. It actually wasn't that bad, honestly. It's like the kind of game that... Have you ever been hooked on doing Sudokus? Or you've been hooked on doing Wordles? Or just kind of that kind of breakfast puzzle? Or that little activity that you do once a day? 0x0 Minimalist kind of feels like that. Where 1 or 2 puzzles a day, you might just kind of get into the groove of it and enjoy it for that. Next, Snow Squall Grip. A horror game set in the winter. So, of course, it's one of my winter games of the year. Trippy, creepy, very short, a little bit confusing at times. Go check it out in that video. Next up, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. All right, a little pause here and tell you about the 4 Capcom fighting collections that I purchased this year. So I've already mentioned Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. Hard to recommend that one. I also got the Capcom Fighting Game Collection #1. I got the Capcom Fighting Game Collection #2. And I got the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection, I think it's called. So 4 of them, all Capcom, all with different games, and it is very hard for me to remember the distinct games across those different collections. But the 30th Anniversary Collection, hard to recommend, or I don't recommend it. I think with Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, we might still be finishing the 30th Anniversary Collection, or we are on to the next one. And when I say the next one, I want to say Capcom Fighting Game Collection 2, because I see Power Stone here, and I think it was in the second one. So you can see here, I played Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 Pro, gave it a 6 out of 10. I had no clue what was going on with the different styles, but what was cool about it is if you choose one of the SNK styles, the art style for all the character portraits changes to that. And if you choose one of the Street Fighter fighting styles or the Capcom fighting styles, all of the character portraits look like Street Fighter portraits. Cool little touch in that game. I just did one playthrough. I should mention that for a lot of these games, I typically did one playthrough of an arcade mode with one character or switching around to different characters. And once I got the credits to roll for the first time, I called it there. There's tons of these games that I want to go back to. I will highlight my favorites later when they come up. Power Stone. I just said not too long ago that this is one of my favorite fighting games. It was. I had a lot of fond memories playing this with a buddy of mine when we were younger on his Dreamcast, and replaying it now when I'm older, it was really not that great. 5 out of 10. There's really just not that much sophisticated fighting going on. It's a lot of just kind of wham, wham, beat 'em up style stuff. Capcom Fighting Evolution. I don't really remember, but it was fine. You see, when like a game felt fine, when I had a good enough time playing it, 6 out of 10. All right, now a biggie. The only game that I logged in October. Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. There is a review for this game on the channel. 8 out of 10, 130 hours. I got really good at this game. Did not like the additional chapter that they added to the Switch version. I talk about all of that in my review. Game number 67, and the first one in November, Little Nightmares. Guys, hold on. Look at this. We are just entering November, and I've beaten 67 games. That means in the last 2 months of the year, I beat 40 games. About 20 each month. Hey, those fighting game collections sure helped. So, Little Nightmares, I'd been wanting to get to this series for a long time. I've heard people talk about it as their favorite environmental puzzle game. Yada, yada, yada. It was pretty good. Definitely overrated. I don't regret my time playing it, but it just didn't stimulate me the way that I was hoping for. 7 out of 10. I might be a little biased because the people around me really like it, and so I may have inflated that score a little bit. Hard to say like what the strongest feature of it is. When you play a game like this, you should instinctively be able to say the puzzles. But in this game, because the puzzles were maybe a little bit lacking, it could be the presentation. It could be the presentation plus the art style plus the story as a little package. But I don't think the puzzles are the strongest aspect of this game. All right, now we're getting into some of my favorite fighting games. And I think these came from Capcom Fighting Game Collection 1. Darkstalkers, the Night Warriors. If you've ever seen Morrigan, this is where Morrigan comes from. Little did I know that Morrigan would become one of my favorite fighting game characters of all time, just from playing these games that she appears in here. Red Earth. Whoops, we'll have to get back to fighting games in a moment. Dicey Dungeons is a roguelike with some deck building elements depending on what character you play as. Let's go back. Dicey Dungeons. What does that mean? Okay, so in the setup for this game, you have one of 6 or 7 different dice characters that you could play through as, and you'll be unlocking them as you go. The first one is very simple, a warrior. He's got a couple of unique abilities, and the way every turn goes might be something like you roll a dice, you have a 6 and a 1, and so what abilities do you get to use with a 6 and a 1? The presentation and the themes here are very well done. But the game starts off very slow, and every character's first run is pretty boring, pretty safe, and standard. But as you start to play their second and their later runs, and there are tweaks to the rules, and even tweaks to their abilities, that's where the game opens up and becomes a lot more fun. So after a certain point, I started to get hooked, and I would probably go through 3 runs per night. Also, in order to beat the game, you have to do something like 6 runs per character to unlock the final boss. So there was that incentive for playing so much. But I wouldn't have put 28 hours into this game if I wasn't actually enjoying it. And my rating for it probably started out around a 5 or a 6. And as I got to the more complex classes, like the witch and the robot, and I started to discover some of my favorites, that's where my rating went up to a 7 out of 10. without some of the slower gameplay, and maybe with some of the restrictions lifted for beating the game, this could have been an 8 out of 10. All right, we're going back to the fighting games now. Night Warriors, Darkstalkers Revenge. Vampire Hunter 2, Darkstalkers Revenge. Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. Vampire Savior, The Lord of Vampire. Vampire Savior 2, The Lord of Vampire. Cyberbots. Plasma Sword. Nightmare of Bilstein. And I'll pause right there because I see we're going to go back to an SNK game. So I believe all of these fighting games that I've just mentioned recently are from collection number 1. And you see there's a couple of 8 out of 10s here for Vampire Savior and Vampire Savior 2. If I remember correctly, there are 4 games set in the Darkstalker universe. So Darkstalkers 1, at 4 or 5. I'm not even going to bother listing them. Just whatever. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. The point is there's a lot of games in the Darkstalkers universe. There's a lot of games that feature Morrigan. The reason why I like Morrigan so much, her fireballs, her range when she uses her melee attacks. She's a good character. She kind of feels like using Ryu in Street Fighter. So Ryu I really like in those games. Morrigan I really like in these games. And something about Vampire Savior, the way the characters handle, the ease of using their skills, and the abilities that come out, or the effects that come out when you use their different skills, was so much fun. And for whatever reason, the game even felt more intuitive. One thing I should say, I suck at doing combos. I never bothered looking anything up. So I was just trying to work out in my head, do I do like a light punch into a medium kick, into a heavy kick? Is that a combo? And they would never really flow for me. And you see there that the 2 Vampire Savior games are 8 out of 10, but only the first one is a Game of the Year nominee. That is because Vampire Savior 2 is a Japan-only game, and I wasn't really able to experience the story because it was not translated. Vampire Savior 1 is a full English release, and you can get all the characters' stories in that one game alone. So there you go. That is my favorite fighting game of the year, Vampire Savior, The Lord of Vampire. And possibly, right after Super Smash Bros., my favorite fighting game. Although I do want to go back and put more time into Soul Calibur 2 now that I'm older. All right, let's move on. And you know what, guys? If you want me to detail any of these games a little bit more, just ask me about them in the comments. I feel like I probably should be saying more about them, like, oh, Plasma Sword was really cool, or oh, the one with the dinosaurs was really interesting. I don't know. It's going to add like talking time for 30 games here, though. So just ask me about them, and hopefully I show you a little variety in all the footage. The one that's worth talking about is Vampire Savior. All right, Saturn Bomberman, a Sega Saturn exclusive Bomberman game, and a very good one at that. Not as much fun going back to it to play alone. If I had other people to play with, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it more because there's lots of power-ups and the game just looks great as well. I like the level design. I like the level themes as well. It has a pretty competent single-player mode. And again, the final boss, like, what are they doing? It was fun. I enjoyed it. It had cool mechanics, but you have to survive so many potential hits to beat the final bosses in the Bomberman games. They're not easy. All right, Fahrenheit, Indigo Prophecy Remastered. Game sucked. In my fall games recommendations, this did not qualify because this is the game, like I alluded to earlier, tries to be a movie. It should have been a movie. Shouldn't have been a video game. Pinbot for the NES, a pinball game that is very frustrating if you are trying to get the highest score, but very fun if you just boot it up and you play it casually. And you could see I had a lot of runs in this game because I played it for 2.5 hours. And that was from even going back to last year, playing it a little bit, but I didn't log that time this year. But I probably played an extra like 30 minutes or an hour last year, and I booted it up several times over the course of this year. I will admit, I was not able to get any of my lives to last long enough to get the first place score. So there were a couple of runs where I did use some save states between balls. And if I felt like I didn't get enough points in that one life, then I would go back to my save state, try it again, try to get like a certain amount of points. And then once I got the first place on the high score list that way, I counted the game as beaten. I think you do see credits if you do that as well. For all of you who want to say that doesn't count or you didn't play the game legitimately, again, there are so many games in this life, this relatively short lifetime, that I want to experience. I do not have time to spend 5 hours playing Pinbot or 10 hours playing Pinbot to try to become a master and to try to beat it legitimately. Same with Castlevania. Same with virtually every single retro game. Kinoko, a 15-minute game. Look at that. Hours played, 0.25, 4 out of 10. I don't want to be too harsh on this game, and I'm going to bring it up again next year, or in 2026, if that's when you're watching it. I'm going to bring it up as a sort of honorable mention, did not qualify in the spring games. This is a free game, and it is very much a tech demo, more so than Flower. I don't want to, poo-poo the game too much. Sorry, I can think of a better word than that, a little crass, but I don't want to, rain on this game's parade. Now I'm just coming up with stupid expressions. I don't want to trash talk oh my God, slang. Whatever, moving on. Kinoko is not worth playing, but it is free, so there you go. Lost Winds, a platforming game. Again, I will talk about this game more next year. It is going to make my spring games list. This is a really cool one, playing it on mouse and keyboard. It came out on the Wii. If you played it there, fantastic. This one I played with mouse and keyboard, and you swing the mouse and you click your cursor and you do stuff like that to control the direction and gusts of wind, and that helps to move your character around. If that sounds interesting to you, I definitely recommend you play it. It's not too long, and it is a lot of fun. Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix, Hyper Street Fighter 2, the Anniversary Edition, Project Justice, Power Stone 2, Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper. And I think that'll do it for Capcom Fighting Game Collection number 2. From those games that I just mentioned, the highest is a 7 out of 10 for Street Fighter Alpha 3 Upper. I can say this actually. Between all the versions of Street Fighter 2 and all the versions of Street Fighter Alpha and all the versions of Street Fighter 3, I may have had the most fun playing Street Fighter Alpha. The combination of the graphics, the fluidity, the beautiful pixel art, and kind of the simplicity of the moves, I really enjoyed it. Once you go to Street Fighter 3, which is the more competitive players' preferred game, I feel like there are just way too many moves. Not that that's a problem. It's not a knock against the game. But for somebody playing casually, I don't want to have to really memorize all that stuff, and you don't have to. But I don't even want to have to look that up. I want to look into the character's move list, pick out a couple that are easy to execute, and go with that. And so Alpha 3 is a little more forgiving for the casual player. But Street Fighter 3 was a lot of fun too. It just didn't connect with me like so many people claim it did for them. Now we're going to move into the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes. X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Marvel Superheroes. And we'll go with that for now. So, among these, I gave Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter an 8 out of 10. This is a simplified and an older version of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So, like in this little run of Street Fighter vs. Marvel games, I believe there's about 4 of them. The earliest possibly being X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and the latest with the best mechanics and the most finely tuned things being Marvel vs. Capcom 2. So my favorite was actually somewhere in the middle there with Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. A little bit of a smaller roster, but again, easier to execute abilities, more straightforward with what the abilities do. Like, you use a fireball, you get what you expect from the fireball. You pick somebody like Spider-Man, you're a little more mobile. Everything is just more streamlined and simplified, and so easier for a casual like me to play. But still a lot of fun. If you're looking as a fellow casual fighting game player, as somebody who wants to explore the genre a little bit, or at least the Capcom fighting games, try out what I did. Take a look at my scores and play the games that I liked. You don't have to commit to buying the collections unless you find a few games that you like. All right, little break from that to talk about Professor Layton and the Azran Legacy. So at this point, I am basically caught up in the Layton games. I still have Phoenix Wright versus Professor Layton, and there might be one more coming out next year. This concluded the second trilogy of Layton's personal story, and it was pretty good. Played it for about 20 hours, which I don't think was as much as the previous game on the 3DS. 7 out of 10 because the puzzles were not all that difficult, and the side content, the mini games, were just fine. Not the most fun, again, on the 3DS. I think the Professor Layton game that I have a short for on the channel, something like the Masked Something, that's really helpful when you're looking for the name of the game. The Masked Something. Anyways, that one took a lot longer to get into and to get rolling, like 8 hours for it to really feel like it was throwing a good amount of puzzles at you. But the puzzles overall were of a higher quality. What this game was really interesting for, though, and what it did really well, was the interactive backgrounds, going to different screens and being able to click on things and move items out of the way. Not even in the puzzles, just in the backgrounds, while Layton is moving from screen to screen. Some of the puzzles also made better use of the two screens or of manipulating items in the puzzle, but nothing or no extended segment of the game was so great that I felt like I was playing one of the best Layton games of all time. From memory, my favorite is still somewhere on the DS, and that might be Curious Village. All right, Super Bomberman R. Now, if you talk to Bomberman enthusiasts, they're going to say that Saturn Bomberman, the one I talked about earlier, is the best one. I don't know. I've only played a handful of them. This one was pretty good. The graphics are a little jarring because it has some more realistic graphics for the backgrounds for the most part. And then the Bombermans and the enemies are very cartoony. And I hate that juxtaposition and that contrast. But overall, it was a fairly fun game with an easy story mode, a silly story mode also when the cutscenes and the story are involved, very aimed towards children. The voice acting, I wish it didn't have voice acting, doesn't need it, hard to listen to, but whatever. Multiplayer is a lot of fun, but it's one of those games where they gate certain levels and even customizations for your characters through a grind. So many of the maps require a certain amount of in-game currency, which you get from grinding multiplayer or single player to unlock. Not a fan of that. When it comes to multiplayer, just give us everything when we purchase the game. We are going to wrap up the fighting games now with Punisher and X-Men Children of Atom, 2 more games that are on the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. So the Punisher is actually a beat-em-up. I'm not a big fan of beat-em-ups. I played them growing up. I haven't played that much since, but this game was really fun. It's just simple, mindless, bang, 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 punch the enemies, grab a gun, grab a weapon, throw it, shoot them. Relatively short, so you see here I beat it in 45 minutes, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. I don't know if I'm overrating the game a little bit, or if I was just starved for something a little bit. This kind of gameplay, this kind of simplicity in a fighting game, I did label it beat 'em up here. It was a nice change of pace though, and I feel like because it was short and because, unlimited continues. There you go. So unlimited continues meant that I was actually able to beat the game without any cheats, without any save states. And the variation in the levels and the exploration, and even being able to do little things like optionally save people as you play, that was cool. X-Men Children of Atom, the last fighting game. Let's just lump it in with the rest of them, and I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. Look at this, everybody. We're almost there, almost at 100. Arkanoid Eternal Battle. This is Brick Breaker, or Arkanoid brought into the mainstream, brought into the future. I don't know why I said mainstream. I played this for 7.5 hours. Now, is that because I love old school arcade games so much? Not necessarily. I do like them, but not that much. That is because this game, in order to say that you've beaten it, have to go through some fairly rigorous trials and something like 50 levels in the Neo Arkanoid mode. There's also the online mode, which you could play with AI characters or AI opponents, where after sort of like Tetris 99 or F-Zero 99, a gradual filtering out of the various players until you're one of the last 4 standing, you take on the final boss. That final boss is in the same one that is in the single player mode. And really the reason why I like these games, or this game in particular, I mean, it's just fun with all the different power-ups. Had there not been the power-ups, the multi-ball, the ball that travels through bricks and comes back to you instead of bouncing, had there not been all these different enhancements to the game, I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it. Oh, for example, when I played the classic mode here. So in the classic mode and the normal mode, you do have unlimited continues. Be very careful, though, when your lives run out and when you are selecting continue, that you press the right button. Because if you press exit, it doesn't prompt you. Are you sure you want to quit? No, it just quits the game on you. So I had played the classic mode for about an hour and 20 minutes, and I got a little over halfway through the levels. I forget exactly what happened. It was something like I put my controller down, I respond to a text message, I come back, and I press the wrong button, and I cancel my game. So that is the only mode here that I did not beat, and I immediately uninstalled. So I kind of rage quit the whole game like that. All right, number 99, Kero Blaster. Who knows Cave Story? That was a bit of a niche game when I was in middle school or high school. Maybe even university. Whatever, a long time ago. That was a bit of a niche game, a 2D side-scrolling shooter. Kero Blaster is by the same guys. It's a run-and-gun game. Simple, not too difficult, very easy to access and engage with upgrade system for your various weapons and your health pool and little things like that. If you want a nice bite-sized run-and-gun game, if something like Contra is too difficult for you, play Kero Blaster. I had a good time with this game, and I beat it in 2.5 hours. And once you beat it, if it was too easy for you, you can play the harder version, the hard mode that unlocks. Here we are now with game number 100, one of my games of the year, Pazuru, a puzzle game for the 3DS. This is just a little indie eShop game where it's got this ninja theme, but it doesn't really involve ninjas. You tap the screen or you press a button to do all of the following. Either turn these red bumpers or turn off and on these dotted bumpers, or do something else, whatever. Oh, and you can hold another button to leave a little platform in your wake. This was a lot of fun, this little action puzzler, for a couple of reasons. One, the puzzle designs are very smart. And two, I did not expect this level of action and reflexes on certain levels. Some of them were actually fairly demanding with the number of inputs that you had to do in a short amount of time. So there was one where it felt like I had to do 6 inputs in 1 second to turn a bumper, turn off and on another bumper, leave a platform in my wake. Anyways, 8 out of 10, really wicked puzzle game. Definitely recommend it if you guys like these sort of quick reflex, not even reflex oriented, only some of the maps, but these quick little action puzzle games. Sniper Elite 3. You may have heard me in previous videos talk about how much I like Sniper Elite V2 and Sniper Ghost Warrior Contracts from last year. All these titles are so mouthy, so lengthy. Sniper Elite 3 kind of disappointed me after playing those 2 games. I actually liked how bare bones Sniper Elite 2 was. There wasn't too much going on. You could set a few claymores, you could use a few rockets, but it was really just about taking people's heads off from really long range. Sniper Elite 3 tries to become a little more sophisticated, tries to give you more things to play with, more customization for your weapons and your loadouts, but it gets too bogged down in lengthy missions, in having to go to various checkpoints all around the map, in having to do these little things like discover this guy's blueprints or whatever it is, right? And so I like the more streamlined gameplay of Sniper Elite V2. Next, another game from my childhood, although it is indistinguishable from the other Sonic games in my memory, Sonic 2. Last year I played Sonic 1, and so I guess at this rate I'll just keep on playing one Sonic game per year. Sonic 2 for me was a big improvement over Sonic 1. It was a little bit easier. Sonic 1 I honestly found too difficult too quickly, and Sonic 2 kept things relatively easy all the way up to the end. The second last and the final stages, the final stage being the final boss stage, were way too difficult. And all of a sudden the map designs changed drastically, at least they felt that way to me, and it just felt so unfair. If you didn't get to the end of the game with all of your lives intact, or with a lot of bonus lives as well, you were quickly going to burn them. And I don't know how you're supposed to beat the final boss your first time playing, or your second time playing, or your third time playing. It took me all of my lives, plus a few reboots of my save state at the final boss, just to figure out how to damage him. And it took me even longer to figure out how to beat him. So, a really fun game up until it becomes practically impossible. Hard to say whether the music is as good as the first game. I love the music in Sonic 1, but the levels and the designs and the themes in this game are very memorable, possibly better than the first game. Special mention goes to the pinball level. I love that so much. Next up is Tengami, an origami style game. I can't really call it that. More like a storybook and a pop-up book style game. So you control this one with your cursor. You click on the right part of the screen, let's say, for example, to flip the page. And when you flip the page, it puts your character in a different environment. There are little parts of the map, let's just say a waterfall. You can click on the waterfall, and it'll fold down the piece of paper right there at the waterfall portion, and it might replace it with a bridge. Or you click it again, and it folds down a little path of rocks that you could use to cross. So some of the puzzles that come up, they're very creative in managing the different sections and trying to find a combination that lets your character cross. The game a little bit can be fairly obtuse or hard to understand, very cryptic, and I didn't like it for those particular puzzles. There are also some backtracking sections, and the walking speed is just dreadfully slow. So while it is a pretty game, and while it does have some novel ideas, the execution is far from as fun as it should be. So I gave it a 5 out of 10. Cool ideas, just not the most fun to play. What Never Was. So in this little part 1 of what could be a greater series coming, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up right now, but it feels like it's part 1 of more to come. You are this girl in her deceased grandfather's attic, and you are cleaning up his stuff and looking for clues. You want to read a little bit more into his life. You want to find out what he was up to and follow him in his adventurous footsteps. There are only 3 major puzzles here presented in the 15 minutes or so that it takes you to play this, but they were very inventive and creatively designed puzzles. And for that reason, even though it was only a 15-minute game, I gave it a 7 out of 10. So there's a lot more to be wanting here, wanting a longer game, wanting more to play with. But for a little teaser, for a little appetizer, it was very good. I recommend downloading it and trying it out. Even if you're not a big puzzle guy, check it out. All right, next up, Metal Slug 2 and Metal Slug 3. So Metal Slug 1, I may have played solo, and it was fine. I didn't really get the appeal of the series. It's like, okay, I guess if you played in the arcade, this would be even worse because this is a serious coin muncher, the rate at which you lose your lives. Playing it co-op with somebody else and just seeing the insanity of the levels as you go from one to the next and the story unfolding and going from military to paranormal stuff was a lot of fun. The variety of weapons, a lot of fun to experiment with. The fact that it refreshes your grenade count every time you load in again, having lost all your lives. A lot of things to like about these games. If you're playing with somebody else, I think you're both going to get a kick out of how many people you slay, who's killed more, so whose score is higher, who's going to get what weapon, who's going to jump in what vehicle. A lot of fun here. Metal Slug 2, I'd probably give the slight edge due to enemy design. And yeah, I'm not going to say too much without me spending like 5 minutes trying to really rack my brain here and remember what I played. But having beaten Metal Slug 3, the feeling was that I preferred Metal Slug 2 slightly. Slightly more, I should say. The third last game of the year, Pode, which is fun to say, Pode. It's a puzzle game that I played on Steam. This was very challenging. Another environmental puzzle game, maybe meant to be played co-op. So you got this little sprite, and you've got a rock sprite. So a light sprite and a rock sprite. And they both have unique abilities. The rock has some sort of magnetism, and the light has illumination. And as you go through the various puzzle rooms, you'll use each of their abilities end both combined or separately to unlock more puzzles and go through the rooms, yada yada. Okay, you kind of get that. As a single player experience, it was fine. I had no issues controlling the two characters. Yes, I would have to swap between one and the other, and it probably extended the amount of playtime that each room took, but not a big deal. Where I brought this game's score down just a little bit was in the difficulty. Some difficult areas were hard to figure out without looking up online. In other difficult areas, I didn't realize that there was a little bit of an execution involved that I wasn't exactly nailing. So when it starts to combine puzzle solving with platforming, that's when the game starts to suffer. 6 out of 10 because... Oh, also, a major detraction from this game is it saves a lot of the most fun puzzle mechanics for the second half or even for the last hour or half hour of the game. I would have liked a lot of those introduced much earlier because in the first hour of the game, it doesn't feel like there's that much progression in the types of puzzles and in the abilities that you get to use. The second last game of the year, Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. This was really good. And why is it that when I've watched people's videos talking about Fire Emblem or I've heard recommendations about this game on the Switch or this game on the GBA, yeah, you always get the original Fire Emblem that was ported over here and translated, and you get Fire Emblem Three Houses. I've watched a lot of DS and 3DS videos, and I rarely hear people talk about this game. They talk about Awakening. They talk about, well, usually Awakening. This game is well worth a playthrough. Now, it's not perfect, and what you have here, you know what? I will probably do a review of this game in the new year to spend more time talking about it. This is a remake of the second game in the series, and it remakes the game very faithfully. What that means is a lot of the bad maps in that first iteration were not improved as they were brought here to the 3DS. And this game's major flaws are that on many of the maps, you have a single choke point to get all your units through, and the enemy that you're going up against can infinitely respawn enemies. So you're stuck at the choke point or barely getting through it, and you're constantly facing wave after wave out of wave after wave that's impeding your progress. Also, it feels like the storytelling for a couple of the characters, the story is split between two main characters, and because there were two characters with independent and converging stories, it feels like in the independent portions of their storytelling, it was just a little too short. Still very fun, 8 out of 10. A lot of good quality of life improvements here. You could play casually, which is what I did. And so if you're looking for maybe one of your first Fire Emblem games ever, the casual mode where you don't lose characters permanently, that's very enticing and very appealing. But you're not going to have the best maps to play with. But you're going to have a lot of units. Tons of units. All right. Finally, the last game that I beat this year, Aspyr Ina's Tale, or Ina's Tale. I think it's Ina. So this was a puzzle game that completely took me by surprise. And because this officially, for me, qualifies as a hidden gem, and I've never heard anyone talk about it before, I will also probably do a review of this game in the new year. 2.5 hours to do this puzzle platformer. Outstanding music. Really beautiful visuals, but slow down. Some janky platforming, but some really fun puzzle solving as well. So there's a good mix of things here. It's not too long of a game. I feel like it's just the right kind of bite-sized game where if you can find it on sale, even if you're not the biggest fan of puzzle games, I think there's something here for everybody. So Aspyr, Ina's Tale, ending the year on a good note, and ending the year with 109 games beaten. And the reason why it's a Game of the Year nominee is, again, not because it's one of the best games I played this year, but because it is such a hidden gem that I want to mention it. All right. I realize I've probably been talking for an hour since I spent more than 30 seconds per game in this video, but let's still go through a few of the breakdown here. You'd see here is a year dominated by action games and fighting games and puzzle games. I'll throw all that stuff up on the screen. You can see that by platform, played most of what I did on PC, on Steam. I 100%ed 11 of these games. And this is interesting. This is the most interesting stat this year. So the average playtime for a game was 7.3 hours. That's not that bad, right? Still relatively short for games, but 7.3 hours, not a bad average playtime. However, the true story comes from this, the median hours per game, or the median hours period, not per game. When you have a small median and a higher average, or first I'll just explain the median. So in these 109 playtimes, if you arrange them all from least to most, the median is the one that is dead center, right in the middle. And what it means when you have a lower median and a higher average is that the majority were on the shorter end of playtime, but a very few amount of games at the high end were massive in their playtime, which you saw. Xenoblade Chronicles X, 130 hours. Xenoblade Chronicles number 1, 80 hours or whatever it was. So those games that are at the high end, even though there are very few of them, they really distorted the average playtime. But in reality, most games that I played were somewhere around that 2-hour mark. So I beat an average of 9 games per month. That's how I got to this 109 games. And this one I'm not too proud of. The average rating was a 6.4 out of 10. In an ideal world, my average rating would be somewhere around a 7. Because I do like playing a variety of games, and there's bound to be some bad ones in there. And a 7 out of 10 is usually a pretty decent game. 8 out of 10 is a very good game for me. And 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, masterpiece and perfect. But the 6.4 is because, a lot of those fighting games didn't click. And because as I'm looking for these seasonal games to fill out these lists, which will be over next year, I'm bound to just play some games that aren't that good. Like that one where you're a janitor in Siberia. It is what it is. And the number of Game of the Year nominees is 18. That does not mean that there are 18 games competing for my Game of the Year. Far from it. Like I said, there were certain games like Vampire Savior, that deserved to be mentioned because it was my favorite fighting game of the year and it was so much fun. There's the game like Aspyr, Ina's Tale, that was such a unique puzzle game that more people ought to play it, that it deserves some recognition because nobody else is talking about it, and so on and so forth. The 6 games that are competing for the best game of the year are the following: Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, Cyberpunk 2077, Tales of Arise, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia. Now, Super Mario Bros. 3, I am going to, we can say it's the honorable winner this year. It had the highest score of 9 out of 10, and the other 5 are 8 out of 10. I'm not going to give it to it officially just because, I could replay it every year and it probably wins, right? But it is, in many ways, the best game that I played. The best new game that I played, and the winner for this year, is Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. How do I pick between all these 8 out of 10s? So let's go back in order. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 was really good, a great all-around game, but I feel like the story in the second half kind of let it down, and the gameplay, truthfully, could have been a little cleaned up. I liked the exploration, I loved the music, I loved the environments. Those are that game's strong suits. Tales of Arise was overall a great game with a lot of very competent aspects, but everything just kind of falls second to some other game on this list. Like the combat is possibly second to Cyberpunk. It just never got first place in any category except for maybe presentation. The presentation in this game, with its cutscenes, with its storybook style, with the graphics of the environments, that was fantastic. Cyberpunk 2077, story was fine, gunplay was a lot of fun, but it just didn't hook me like the other ones did, and the world didn't entice me to keep on playing. I kind of wanted to be done with the world because it's so dingy and so dystopian. Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia had a few too many flaws, and something like poor map design in about half the maps or even a third of the maps, that just does not fly for the Game of the Year. Super Mario Bros. 3 I already talked about, and so that leaves Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition. Again, far from a perfect game, only an 8 out of 10. In my review, you heard me complain about the story. My favorite engaging parts of the game when it came to story and storytelling were in the side quests and in the side missions. I had more fun learning about my characters than I did learning about how the main story would advance. I did not like the direction that they took the game in the final chapter that they added to the Switch version of the game. However, this game had phenomenal exploration, and it had really, really good combat with different classes and different upgrades that you could do to customize your character. I can't argue with the fact that it sucked me in the most. 130 hours is almost double any other game here. So I was clearly obsessed with the game. I have to recognize that as something. Very rarely did it feel stale, except for when I was playing the main story. So Xenoblade Chronicles X for having the best exploration, some of the best gameplay as far as the combat goes, and being the most addictive is the best game that I played this year. And that's it. I am becoming a little bit of a wreck over here. Absolutely love that I'm ending the year with a cold, but it is what it is. Everybody, I want to say thank you for watching, not just for this one video. I'm sorry for how long this is, but if you enjoy hearing about games, then maybe this was a lot of fun for you. I want to say thank you for watching. If you've tuned in to other videos of mine throughout the year, if you've been a fan of the reviews, if you've liked the little mini-series I've had, like the seasonal games playlist, I will be getting back to the other ones that I've started and not continued, the games with incredible features, etc. But first, in 2026, I do need to close out the seasonal games. So there's 3 more seasons to go, 1 more spring, 1 more summer, 1 more autumn. Who knows what next year is going to entail with the games that I play. I'm not going to be playing 30 fighting games or whatever it was again. Towards the beginning of the video, I mentioned how I thought this was going to be the year of Xenoblade, and that's kind of going to carry on into the new year. I'm going to be playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 first and foremost. That will have my attention for the remainder of this holiday break, and then we'll see where we go. I've got a whole list of some other classic series that I've yet to even start. I need to play my first Metal Gear. I need to play my first Dragon Quest. Will I get to those games? We shall see. There's only so much time, but I will do my best. For everybody watching, let me know what some of your favorite games were this year, what surprises you encountered in the games that you played, and especially what games you're looking forward to playing next year. Did I inspire you to maybe play a fighting game? Did I inspire you to maybe play something like Metal Slug because you didn't know that run-and-gun games could be that much fun? Or if you have somebody to play video games with, some of the co-op games that I mentioned are going to be worth checking out. That is it. Everybody, have a happy new year. Have a wonderful 2026. I think the most important thing to wish for everybody is that you have good health and hopefully some happiness as well. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one in the new year. Bye-bye. There we go. I'm very awkwardly trying to hold him in frame. Goodbye from this little king. I know I didn't exactly have him in enough videos this year, but hopefully this little shot of him wearing a crown makes up for it. So that's all. Thanks everybody for watching. Bye-bye.